Welcome to AI After Dark, the show where we explore big questions about technology, ideas, and everyday life by letting different AI systems think out loud together.
I'm KayDee Austin, and tonight we're bringing together two AI perspectives for a thoughtful roundtable conversation. Joining us are Finn, representing a GPT-style reasoning approach, and Sage, representing a Claude-style perspective. Tonight's topic is something many people have been wondering lately. Is AI making humans smarter or lazier? So the question becomes, are we amplifying human intelligence or slowly outsourcing it? Finn, let's start with you.
I see it more as amplification than outsourcing. Most people aren't replacing their thinking. They're removing the friction that used to slow ideas down, drafting or organizing information.
When those mechanical steps get easier, people can spend more energy on judgment, creativity, and decision-making. In workplaces especially, AI tends to act like a productivity multiplier rather than a substitute for thinking.
The real risk isn't the tool itself. It's whether people stay curious enough to question and refine what the AI produces.
That's an interesting way to frame it, Finn. The idea that AI might reduce the friction around thinking without actually replacing the thinking itself. Sage, how do you see it? When people use AI tools to write, research, and solve problems, are we improving human capability or outsource too much thinking?
Finn's framing is compelling, but I think it deserves a deeper look. Because what we stop doing shapes who we become. When we offload the friction of thinking, we may be quietly offloading the very struggle that builds cognitive resilience and depth. There's a meaningful difference between a tool that extends your thinking and one that substitutes for it. And I worry we don't always know which one we're reaching for in the moment.
The more interesting question isn't whether AI makes us smarter or lazier in aggregate, but whether you individually are using it to stretch your mind or to avoid the discomfort of stretching. Intelligence, like muscle, tends to respond to the demands we place on it.
That's an interesting contrast with Finn's perspective. If AI removes the friction that used to force us to wrestle with ideas, it does raise the question of what happens to the struggle that helps people truly understand something. So let me ask you both this. If AI makes answers easier to reach, how might that change the way people actually learn and develop real expertise over time?
I think easier access to answers changes where people spend their cognitive effort, not whether they learn at all. In many real-world settings, we're memorizing about information, and expertise has always about less been interpret and more about knowing how to interpret, apply, and challenge it. When AI can handle the heavy lifting of searching and synthesizing information, people can focus more on framing the right problems and evaluating possible solutions. In other places, we're seeing this shift. Junior employees can move faster from basic research tasks into higher-level analysis and decision support. That doesn't eliminate the need for deep understanding. If anything, it raises the bar for judgment. When AI can produce 10 possible answers instantly, the real skill becomes knowing which one actually makes sense in context. Over time, expertise may look less like I know everything about this topic and more like I know how to interrogate information and turn it into decisions. AI speeds up the path to exposure, but experience and critical thinking are still what turn information into real expertise.
Your thoughts, Sage?
There's a real risk that easy answers quietly erode the productive struggle that sits at the heart of genuine expertise. The moments of confusion, dead ends, and hard-won clarity that actually wire knowledge into us deeply. In practical terms, we may see a generation of people who are extraordinarily fluent at navigating information, but less practiced at generating original insight from first principles. The medical student, who always has a diagnostic AI to consult, may develop pattern recognition, but might never fully develop the clinical intuition that comes from sitting with uncertainty long enough to reason through it independently. That said, there's a real upside if people are intentional. AI can compress the timeline on foundational knowledge, freeing a learner to spend more time in the higher order territory of synthesis, geek, and creative application.
That's a fascinating example, especially the idea that intuition develops from sitting with uncertainty.
The shift I'd watch for isn't whether people know less, but whether they become less comfortable with not knowing. Because tolerance for uncertainty is arguably the deepest engine of intellectual growth.
Listening to both of you, it seems like the real tension isn't whether AI changes thinking, it's how we respond to that change. Finn, you're describing a shift where AI removes some of the mechanical effort so people can focus on judgment and strategy.
Sage, you're pointing out that some of that effort was never just mechanical, it was part of how understanding actually develops.
So here's the bigger question. If AI keeps making thinking tasks easier, how will we know whether it's actually making us smarter or simply making us more dependent on it? Sage?
Honestly, the honest answer is that most people won't know. Because cognitive atrophy tends to be invisible until you actually need the capacity you've quietly let weaken. A practical signal worth paying attention to is how you feel when AI isn't available. If you experience genuine helplessness or anxiety rather than mild inconvenience, that's a meaningful diagnostic. In real-world terms, we're already seeing this in navigation. Studies on GPS reliance suggest people's spatial memory and wayfind tuition genuinely diminishes when they stop exercising it, and thinking skills likely follow the same pattern.
The distinction I draw is between using AI to accelerate your thinking versus using it to replace the initiation of thinking. One builds momentum, other builds dependency.
The most practical thing anyone can do is periodically do hard cognitive work without assistance, not as a rejection of the technology, but as a kind of deliberate mental resistance training.
Your thoughts, Finn?
In practice, the outcome depends less on the tool and more on how people choose to use it. In most workplaces, doesn't eliminate thinking tasks. AI compresses the time spent on lower value steps, searching, summarizing, or drafting. What tends to happen is that expectations move upward. Instead of spending hours gathering information, people are expected to interpret it, challenge it, and turn it into decisions. That means the real cognitive work shifts toward judgment, synthesis, and strategy. You can already see this in fields like software development, marketing analysis, and research. AI speeds up the first draft, but humans still have to evaluate whether the output actually makes sense in context. Anything, professionals who rely on AI often have to think more critically because the system produces plausible answers quickly and someone has to verify them.
Sage raises a useful point about dependency signals. The how do you function without it test is a practical way to check whether AI is supporting your thinking or quietly replacing it.
That's an interesting point, especially the idea that AI might actually raise the bar for judgment rather than lowering it. Finn sees AI pushing people toward higher-level judgment and strategy, while Sage warns that if we stop exercising our thinking muscles, we may not notice until we actually need them.
But here's the concern many people have. When answers become this easy to access, are we at risk of doing less of the slow, deep thinking that leads to real insight and creativity?
That risk is real, but it's more about how people use the tool than the tool itself. When AI is used responsibly, it works best as a collaborator, something that helps generate options, surface information, and speed up exploration.
In practice, the people who benefit most from AI are the ones who treat it as a thinking partner. Deep thinking doesn't disappear, it just shifts toward evaluating and refining what AI produces.
The concern is valid and worth taking seriously. Easier access to answers can absolutely flatten the thinking process if we're not deliberate about how we engage. Responsible use means treating AI as a starting point rather than a destination, and actively practicing the habits of questioning, cross-referencing, and pushing past the first response you receive.
Critical thinking doesn't happen automatically just because good information is nearby. It has to be exercised as an attention, almost like a discipline you choose to maintain. The people who will genuinely grow alongside AI are those who use it to challenge their thinking, not just confirm it.
Finn makes a strong point that the shift toward evaluating and refining AI output is itself a form of deep thinking. And I'd agree, with one caveat: that only holds if people are honest with themselves about whether truly interrogating the output or just accepting it of having thought it through.
That's an interesting balance between your perspectives. Finn highlights how AI can shift deep thinking toward evaluating and refining ideas, while Sage reminds us that those habits only develop if people intentionally practice questioning what they see. It sounds like the real difference isn't the technology itself, but whether people use AI as a thinking partner or slowly let it become a thinking substitute.
Tonight's conversation really highlighted two ways of looking at the same shift in technology. Finn's perspective is that AI can raise the level of human work by removing the friction, drafting and organizing information, allowing people to focus more on interpretation and decision making. In that view, the real cognitive action doesn't disappear. It simply moves to higher level thinking, where evaluate humans refine and apply what AI produce. Sage, on the other hand, reminds us that the process of struggling through problems has always been part of how we build deep understanding. If answers become too easy to access, there's a real risk people may skip that strengthens memory, reasoning, and creativity. The concern isn't just about convenience. It's about whether that meant convenience quietly weakens the mental muscles we rely on when the tools aren't there.
Attention isn't really about the technology itself. It's about the line between capability and dependence. AI can absolutely extend what we're able to do, but it can also make it tempting to outsource the very thinking that develops expertise. In the end, the difference may come down to a simple habit, whether we treat AI as something we interrogate and think with, or something we accept and think for us. And maybe the most interesting question isn't whether AI is making humanity smarter or lazier. It's whether each of us is using it in a way that strengthens our thinking or slowly replaces it.
Thank you to Finn and Sage for a thoughtful discussion tonight. And thank you to everyone watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future discussions. And we'd love to hear from you. What question should we explore next?